Just jumping in here quickly to let you guys know that I have recently created a Facebook group for listeners of the Live, Train, Perform podcast. So this private forum is the place to connect with other podcast listeners and guests, as well as to interact with myself and other coaches who have provided content for the Coach's Corner episodes. So in this forum, you can ask questions, which I can then answer in the group, or I can use them for episodes for my Q&A sessions, post relevant articles. You can share memes. The goal is to create a network of like-minded people so that everyone can interact with each other. You guys, the listeners, the audience members, can interact with a network of professionals in the fitness industry that have provided good quality content for the podcast. To gain access to this private group, all you need to do is leave me a rating and review. What this does is allows me to bump up the ratings, draw bigger names, bigger guests to the podcast for your listening pleasure. Once you've left a rating and review, take a screenshot of that, send that through to my Instagram at coach_Kobes, Kobes. Once you've done that, go onto Facebook, type in Live, Train, Perform. That group will come up, request access, answer the 3 questions, and I will grant you access. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. What does it mean to live life to the fullest, train to your potential, and perform at your best?
Leave nothing on the table. That's a non-negotiable, is that I strive to be better every day. Because if I'm not on top of my game, how's anybody else going to follow me down the road?
Keep demanding more of yourself to live up to that potential and to stay hungry.
Training is progress. You know, when I look at the word training, I think of steps, baby steps to get somewhere that you want to be. And that is basically your life journey. It's
a mindset in itself, man. It's like, it's not just about, I know that for you, a lot of that's about the physical, but we're constantly in training, whether it's growing our skill sets, whether it's growing our physical bodies, whether it's growing our relationships, whatever. And all of that's a training ground. And that kind of goes back to the mindset that we just talked about.
You underestimate yourself and you don't even start. But then once you start, you often surpass what you thought you could do.
Perform at your best, mate. That's sort of what life is all about. You know, I want to have the knowledge, I want to have the fitness, the health, the ambition and drive that no matter what comes along, when that next phone call comes, I can just say yes. I don't have to worry. Just go and do it.
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Live, Train, Perform podcast. I'm your host, Sean Kober, and joining me today is Luke Leaman for the second time, otherwise known as Daddy written on his screen. Hello, Daddy.
Hello. What's going on?
How's things, mate?
Yeah, they're good. They're good. Can't complain. Life's hard right now, but we will persevere.
Always, brother. Luke is one of the founders of Muscle Nerds, and he is also the owner of Institute of Physical Culture, which is a gym in Brisbane. How's the gym been through these tough times, mate?
It's not bad. It's slow, but it's not bad. When we bought the gym,
you actually opened it up right at the start of the pandemic, right?
Yeah. So my wife wanted to get a gym, and I'm like, okay, cool. We're not going to build this. I don't want to have to find a space and then do the whole build out and then buy all the equipment and then set up the systems. We just want something turnkey. So we kept looking through Gumtree and looking through Facebook, and can we find somebody who decided they want a gym, but then realized I'm shit at business and I don't know how to run a gym. And we found one that was about 25 minutes from our house. We're like, all right, that would be perfect. But she wanted too much for it. We weren't really getting enough. And so I offered her 50% of what she wanted. And she basically told us to F off. And I said, okay, that's fine. Call us when nobody else buys it. So four months or so later, she calls us and I got it for about 60% of what she wanted. And 5 days later, we had to shut down because of COVID lockdowns. So that was fun.
Fuck. Yeah, we're just talking offline, man, about what you've been going through with the gym and all of the things that you see behind the scenes. And I thought it was crazy because you've been in the industry a long time, and if anyone doesn't know who Luke is, go back and listen to the first episode and get your head out from your ass. Luke's a heavyweight in the industry. He's been around for a long time. But, it was crazy to hear you saying all of those things that were going on behind the scenes, because you've been in gyms a long time. You've been in the industry a long time, but, talking about the things that have come up for you since owning a gym. For people that, there's some fitness experts, there's some coaches, there's some trainers that listen to this, as well as general population clients. For people that are potentially looking at opening a gym, talk about some of the lessons that you've learned and some of the things that you didn't really consider that you have had to take on since buying a gym.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard business, man. You open a gym and you got to keep the equipment maintained. You got to switch out equipment. You got to, fix broken equipment, get it out and get new stuff in. You got to cater to the clients. Everybody's going to want something different. Like I just put a bunch of air runners in the gym and removed a couple of treadmills that were broken. And everybody's like, oh, you don't like these, get the motorized. I'm going, well, the motorized ones are like 12 grand and these are 5. And these are better for you anyways, and they'll last longer. So just learn how to run on the fucking air runner. And they don't want to hear it, right? They want you to cater to every single person. And even like with programming, they're used to doing boot camps. We don't do boot camps. They want to do F45 style shit. We don't do that. Like we do properly periodized programming to get you strong, which is what you should be doing in the gym. Build muscle, build strength. We don't do cardio in the workouts. You want to do cardio? Go do that on your own. I don't need to put that in a class and watch you run on the treadmill. So and then like I took my home equipment to the gym, which is all Atlanta stuff. And we've got a reverse hyper, and we put the reverse hyper by a wall, and I meant to put a sign up showing how to use it. Well, a guy got on it, treated it like a leg curl, flipped it around and put a big hole in the wall. So there's always some stupid shit that's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Now let's talk about why you don't include cardio in the boot camp style or in the group classes.
Yeah. So
because this is something that comes up all the time for me, man. Is like, I say to people like, why are you training? Oh, to burn calories. People are always like all about the calorie burn. I'm like, man, if you're fucking training to burn calories, you're looking at exercise the wrong way. Like you can burn calories so many other fucking ways. Training, if you're going to be dedicating an hour every day, or 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week to training, you want to make sure that you're actually getting something beneficial from it, not just fucking burning calories, man.
Yeah. And look, I don't have a problem burning some calories, but that shouldn't be the focus. And it shouldn't be the focus initially, especially when you look at Gen Pop, because they're all weak. They all have pain and structural dysfunction that you have to fix. They don't have a lot of muscle mass. They're all overweight. They're all underconditioned or deconditioned. Their nutrition sucks. So we realistically need to put the cart after the horse instead of before the horse. And so initially, we're looking at, we do for our group training, every quarter, we look at their blood pressure, their resting heart rate. We do a cardiac output test. We do squat, deadlift, bench, chin up. So we do needle wall tests. We do a lot of different tests, and then we make them a report card so that they see what's happening with their training and why they're doing it. But when we told them when you come to the class, we're lifting weights. That's all we're doing. Oh, well, how am I going to lose weight? You're going to do table push-aways. That's the exercise you're going to do, and I can't be there to spot you on that. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear about nutrition. It's like, look, if you use cardio as a caloric burn, you're just going to compensate by eating more. And over time, if you don't run harder, you're not burning that many calories. So the only way you're going to make the cardio work for that is you have to continuously run harder and harder and harder, just like with the weights, you have to add more and more weight. So people need to understand
that is progressive overload 101.
And progressive overload, that term was originally created for weightlifting, but that can go to anything. Like cardio, if you're using it like you should for the adaptations, progressive overload. I'm building new red blood cells, younger, healthier blood cells. I'm creating cardiac changes that allows my blood pressure to go down. I'm creating a stimulus for my blood vessels to dilate so my blood pressure drops, my resting heart rate drops. Those are the adaptations you're looking for. So it has to have a systematic approach of where do I start, where do I finish, and what's in between, just like weightlifting and just like anything else.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because that's something that I learned from you on the Muscle Nerds Foundation course was, the importance of blood pressure, heart rate variability, waking heart rate, temperature, etc. Why is it important to track those metrics?
Well, if you're not tracking anything, then you can't manage anything, right? You only manage what you measure. So if we're taking a health first approach and a health before performance, which is what we teach, we need to put you in a healthy position before we go to highly specific stuff. So if you come in and you've got pain and you've got postural issues and movement impairment issues, then the weight training has to be moved towards fixing a lot of those things, at least fixing them enough to reduce pain and improve movement. Then we can get specific with specific hypertrophy, specific strength gain. With nutrition, it's the same thing. If you're really overweight, well, we know we need a caloric deficit. We need enough protein. And then some people might need a lower carb approach or a moderate carb approach over somebody else. Just, it's all very highly specific to them. And the conditioning is the same way. So when we look at things like blood pressure and resting heart rate, those are really easy metrics that can be taken. They're cheap, they're easy, they can be replicated every day. And so if somebody comes in and they have stage 2 hypertension and they have a high resting heart rate, their access to certain things, certain tools that they could be using is gone. Like, we have to fix that before we further insult the cardiovascular respiratory system with training. So we get people coming in who are on blood pressure medication that are sitting at 170, 180 over 100. I'm not going to put them on a leg press where it's going to massively crank up vascular pressure and have them start plaquing and end up with a heart attack or a stroke. I'm not going to have them lift heavy 5-rep maxes or 3-to-1 wave loading. It's not going to happen. We need to get the cardiovascular system healthy first, which means we might need to do more of an emphasis on cardiac output or aerobic activity. And that's a great time to run structural balance. Unilateral movements do not produce as high a blood pressure response as bilateral movements. Machines where you need a lot of Valsalva maneuver, like a leg press, probably not a great idea when your blood pressure is high. Let's get that rectified first, then go to the leg press. Heavy squats, heavy deadlifts.
Or a million burpees.
Yeah, people doing horrible burpees. They can't even do a push-up, and now they're basically throwing themselves at the ground, slamming at the ground, putting their back in a massive extension, and then trying to get up, and then they're building up more and more fatigue. They get more and more sloppy, or 100 box jumps, or any of that shit.
Man, we'll move on to that in a moment. But before that, let's talk about how important periodization is for general population clients as well, because, we talk about it in terms of training athletes, but a lot of trainers don't even consider periodization of training, nutrition, and recovery when it comes to working with general population clients. Now, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. That's my background. And I apply those same principles that I use my athletes to general population clients. I just need to tweak and adjust how I'm presenting that information and the protocols that I'm using.
Yeah, look, if you're not periodizing for Gen Pop, what are you doing? We're in an industry where people get paid a lot of money per hour. You need to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going, right? So you wouldn't take a road trip without a map or GPS. You'd never get there, and you'd probably get lost. So, if we think about training, should be specific adaptation to impose demand. The only way I get that is by saying, okay, what's the adaptation? Okay, what's the specific thing that gives me that adaptation? And then what's the beginning and what's the end?
How long do we have to work on that?
That's right. And okay, where do we want to end and where are we starting? Now, what do I need to do through that entire time to get to that goal or to exceed that goal? So, it's very common in the industry right now. People say you don't really need specificity for general population. I disagree. If people have health issues, we have to be specific at getting rid of those. If they have pain and dysfunction, let's get rid of those. If they want hypertrophy, cool, let's do that. Strength, whatever that is. But it's like a lot of you have like 1 or 2% of the industry who really know what they're doing, and they periodize everything, and they walk in and they've got a plan. They've got a spreadsheet, or they're using some type of training platform like we use True Coach. They're using MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, which is what we use. Like, you should have stuff where you can monitor your client, and you should be able to predict where they're going to go. If you don't understand periodization and you don't understand how to do a proper subjective and objective assessment, and then a specific protocol to that, you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, when I get a client, I can tell them how long it's going to take for the blood pressure to get to a certain level, certain body fat, certain level of muscle leanness, certain amount of strength. And I can nail that on the money because I understand how to write the plan in a way that's going to progress them to that position safely.
Which is the brilliance of, you as a coach, and good coaches. Like, that is the art of coaching. You can tell people ahead of time what they can expect, so that nothing is going to be a surprise for them. When we go through this period, this phase here, you're going to be in a caloric deficit. You're going to be depleted. You're going to be, it's going to affect your mood and your attitude and blah, blah, blah. You're getting closer and closer to that body composition goal. Your training's going to take a hit. Your strength levels are going to come down. You're going to be feeling a little bit shit, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're telling people that stuff before they get to that point, so that, you're managing expectations essentially. And that is the art of coaching, is giving people the information to be able to understand ahead of time what they're going to experience.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you can tell them ahead of time, you're being very proactive. When they get to that point where they're deep in the hole or where they're feeling a certain way, you've already told them they're going to feel that way, and you've also given them strategies of what to do about it, right? Okay, you're getting really, really hangry. Cool. Let's add in some Jello. Let's add in some more fiber. Let's add in more vegetables. Let's add in some stuff that's going to keep you more full so you don't feel that way. Or let's add in some more recovery methods, a little bit extra sleep. But in order to do that, you need a few things. Number one, you need to understand biology. You need to understand basic biochemistry, basic exercise metabolism. You need to understand these things: functional anatomy, gross anatomy, functional anatomy. That way, when you make that plan, everything comes together correctly. Now, once you know that stuff, then picking a method or picking a sequence of different things makes a lot more sense. And the way the body moves towards that makes a lot more sense. So instead of hitting everyone with a fucking sledgehammer and putting them on 900 calories and 2 hours of cardio a day or 20,000 steps a day and a six sessions a week of weight training, you don't have to do that stuff. You can say, okay, let's have targeted specific things that I know are going to work well together and work on a reductionist model. What's the least amount of shit I need this client to do that's going to give them the biggest bang for the buck, especially with Gen Pop, because they don't have time to train 40 hours a week. Training is not supposed to be a part-time job for people. They've got kids, they've got bills, they've got work, they got a partner. You have to be more realistic with what they can do and what they can actually the amount of time that they can actually commit to doing the stuff you need them to do.
Yeah, great point, mate. I want to touch on something you spoke about there about like biology, biochemistry, etc., etc. Now, I did your foundations course a couple of years ago. That's when I first met you. But I've noticed that you guys have a foundation nutrition course. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, I mean, with the COVID stuff, we've had to go put a lot of our stuff online or start putting stuff online, which I don't like. I know we have to. That's the way the future is. They don't want to have to travel anymore. They don't want to have to get a hotel room and take off work. So I was like, well, what's the most common?
I still will, for sure.
I mean, same thing.
I love that in-person stuff, man.
Same. And I'll always do that once I can leave this country and actually do it and get back in. That's the problem. I can get out. I might not be able to get back in, but I love the in-person stuff. That's my favorite. I've been doing Zoom lectures online. I cannot stand it because people are in their pajamas. They're just like, you look in the background, their dog's taking a shit on their rug, and it's just, and you can't read their faces. I hate it. But with that nutrition course, we said, okay, let's start taking stuff out of foundations, and we'll just start teaching most of the easy stuff in a way that coaches can understand it without having a big science background, and also Gen Pop can as well. So we've made that course where it's technical enough that I feel like, okay, so we're talking about sugar biochemistry and fat biochemistry and all this, but it's not so technical that the common person with no science background, they wouldn't be confused. And we have a lot of coaches, some of our students, that actually either buy that course for their clients or get their clients to buy it as well, because it's like, let me do all the work. Let me teach them the stuff you have to keep repeating to them. So if you just have them do that, now you don't have to explain all this stuff. And I can probably explain it probably better than most people could, at least in a watered down version. So we go through a lot of stuff on, the importance of calories, how to actually calculate calories, protein, carb, fat biochemistry, and then proper amounts based on the literature and based on our experience. High fat versus low fat, high carb versus low carb, when they're useful. We also go through how, we do everything we do revolves around stress and its impact on your brain. So we do a stress lecture in there and how it affects your metabolic flexibility or inflexibility. And then we do a big talk on, this is especially for coaches, of culture, religion, and belief systems. And so if you're one of these guys who are like, oh, I'm so carnivore and vegans are stupid, or you're vegan and you're the same way, you have to understand that there are certain religions where they're vegetarian or vegan. There are people who that's their culture. That might be their belief system. It's not for us to tell people what they should believe in. It's for us to help them do it better. So if I get a vegan, I need to know, I don't need to fight that. They're not going to eat meat. If it's for ethical reasons, or they watch Game Changers and they have a convoluted idea of veganism, it's not for me to tell them it's not that unhealthy or it's not that healthy. It's for me to say, okay, how do I make you a healthier vegan without insulting you and telling you that you should do something else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, there's the optimal way of doing something, but then if that doesn't work for some people because of their culture, their belief, their religion, or whatever, then we need to find the ideal way for them. And this ties back into what we were talking about before about that specific protocol for every single individual.
Yeah, 100%. And you've heard me say this before. I've got an optimal way. I'd love to do this. If we did it this way, man, this would be so fast and painless. But this doesn't fit with you, so I have to go to what's practical. So we're going to have to. It might be slower, or we might have to use a different route or a different method. But we can get there in the end. I just need to understand how the science works and how to manipulate the variables that fits you, your biochemical individuality, your training individuality, your culture, belief system, whatever individuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's go back to the stress physiology, because I think that's such an interesting topic, man. This ties into gut health. So was it like 80% of your immune system lies within the gut? Mm-hmm. So if you're, not looking after your gut health because you're under chronic stress, or you've got all this stress that you're not dealing with turns into chronic stress, then that can suppress your immune system, which then has an impact on so many other physiological factors in the body. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, shit, that's a lot to unpack, but you're absolutely right. And most of the time when people get gut issues, they go to somebody and they run a bunch of expensive tests that they don't actually need to run, and they prescribe them a bunch of supplements they don't actually need. I always assume that if somebody comes to me with a gut issue, most of the protocols that I would use as far as supplements, nutraceuticals, and food, it pretty much works on anything, whether you have something or not, or whatever that thing is. So I would rather, let's try this for 12 weeks. And if you're not significantly better, then we'll order, $700, $800 worth of testing and see exactly what it is. And if I need to refer you out to somebody that, like a doctor, somebody who specializes in gut health. But what I find is, the majority of the time, if I can get your brain to calm down and get you out of a chronically sympathetic state, a lot of your gut issues go away. If I get you to chew your food like an adult, a lot of your issues go away. If I get you to...
That's such a simple one, man. It's so simple, dude. But like, people think they're like, well, that's stupid. Like, that's way too
easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. Why is it so important that people actually chew their fucking food properly?
So,
like, what happens at a base level in the gut?
Okay, so
let's start from the start, from plate.
From the plate. Okay, so the first thing is you look at that first stage, that stage of your brain and its interpretation of the food. So you've got the smell, sight, touch, texture. All of these things can have a massive impact on how that food is then regulated downstream. So you have that. The secondary thing is mechanical and chemical digestion. So a big overarching theme of digestion assimilation is surface area. So if you were to pull your intestines out, you cut them in, like split them down and then stretch them out, it would have the same surface area of a doubles regulation tennis court. So that's massive. Like, I don't suggest anybody do that. That's probably not a good idea, but
please don't do it to someone else either.
Yeah, don't do it. I actually, years ago, a friend of mine was a cop, and he sent me a picture. Some dude had been on meth for like 5 or 6 days, and when he showed up, the guy had surgically cut his stomach and was pulling his intestines out, and they had to handcuff him. They had to handcuff him with his intestines just laying out until the guys could get there to stabilize him to take and put his fucking intestines back in. It's pretty wild.
That's crazy, bro.
So I don't know. Maybe he read that in a textbook and wanted to test it out. I don't know. But
don't do meth, kids.
Don't do meth. So to increase surface area, you obviously you already have the equipment to do it. But the secondary thing you have to do is you have to break food down in the smallest pieces possible, which means initially it's mechanical digestion by mastication. You need to chew your food until it's a semi-liquid state. And you also need to have the digestive enzymes to do it as well. So you have to have enough gastric juices, hydrochloric acid in the stomach, pepsin. You need enough pancreatic enzymes, enough bile acids. All of this stuff is really important to continue breaking down proteins into single amino acids or di and tripeptides. You need to be able to break sugars down into monosaccharides. You need to be able to break all this stuff down. If you have a lot of stress and you have poor metabolic flexibility, there's a good chance that your mitochondria don't have enough available energy to make those gastric juices. So the more ramped up you get and the more anaerobic you get, and the less ATP you're making, your body starts prioritizing that ATP for survival. So it's Bruce Ames' triage theory. So in a case of some type of deficiency, whether that's a nutrient deficiency or stress causing some type of substrate deficiency like ATP, your body's going to prioritize short-term survival over long-term needs. So digestion is not that important to your body if a lion jumps out at you. So if you are running life with a monkey on your back all the time, the body is going to prioritize that stress response, which is then going to cause a desensitization or downregulation of creating gastric juices. So chewing your food effectively is good, and then possibly even taking a digestive enzyme for a while, a good comprehensive blend that has the hydrochloric acid, pepsin, pancreatic enzymes, oxybol, all that stuff to give a little bit of support. If you give it a little bit of support, you get more nutrients in, stop chronically dieting, stop over exercising, get more sleep, start doing some of that hippie yin shit like journaling and, headspace or whatever. Meditation and shit, which I'm a big fan of. Start taking that stuff more seriously, and then your body won't have a problem breaking things down. And I find that if you just calm the brain down, chew your food like an adult, take a good digestive enzyme for a little bit of time, in a lot of cases, probably 95% of the gut issues I see just go away mysteriously. Food intolerances go away, immune system issues go away, diarrhea, constipation, that stuff goes away.
Yeah, man. Yeah, just to echo what you said and tie into that as well, is like, when you're sitting down for a meal, like turn your fucking phone off, like stop working and actually pay attention to the meal. Take in, what you see, what you smell, what you can taste, because, that's essentially prepping your body to eat. As you said, it's producing certain enzymes, your mouth's producing saliva, so that you can start breaking down that food into its smaller pieces.
Yep.
Now, what are some tools that people can use to actually get into the moment and slow the fuck down so they can actually digest, absorb, and assimilate those nutrients? Because, as you said, if you're in this sympathetic state where you're on your phone whilst you're eating, you're not paying attention to your food, you're not chewing properly, then that's going to have a flow-on effect downstream. You're not going to be able to break down those foods. They're going to stay in your stomach, in your intestine for a lot longer, and potentially you're missing out on a heap of nutrients and some energy as well by calories. Is that correct?
Yeah. And the thing is, the longer, so let's say you have a long-term low energy availability and your body is starting to tone down things like thyroid conversion. It's starting to tone down some gastric juices. That can lead to a level of constipation. And being sympathetic will actually make your anus will stay in a contracted state. So it's going to be harder and harder to push poo out, and you start losing peristalsis. If your neurotransmitters start to get wonky and you start losing serotonin and melatonin in the gut, you can't really push. You have a reduced ability to push poo out, right? So anytime that fecal matter stays in your intestines, people need to understand that when you're detoxifying things, and you're constantly detoxifying things around the clock, part of that is getting that into the gut and then pooing it out. Well, if the longer it sits in the gut, there's a high chance, especially if you had dysbiosis, that you could uncouple those detox toxins and then recirculate them through the enterohepatic portal back through the liver, which then causes the liver to get sluggish. So then you might have a slowed down ability to detoxify because the liver's it's just working too hard. It's like a single mom working 3 jobs and she can't keep up. So you got to treat your liver right. And a lot of people have nutrient deficiencies where they can't detox fast enough anyways. And especially if you're in a fat loss diet. So that type of stuff can cause a long-term chronic fatigue. It can cause inability to recover from workouts, poor sleep, and then that compounds the stress. So that, and you can cause over absorption of certain things you're not supposed to, like food particles that aren't broken down enough, and that causes immune system dysregulation that then affects cortisol and histamine release, which then suppresses your immune system. So it gets harder and harder to fight this stuff. And then you end up with a long-term, low-grade chronic illness where you're just kind of sick all the time. You're always got the sniffles and the coughs and feeling run down. And you just wish I just get fucking sick. If I just get sick and get it over with. And then the minute they de-stress, they end up getting sick. They go on holiday and they're sick as shit for 3 days and then they feel amazing. But so, low thyroid, low serotonin, that can cause issues.
So I was going to say, so if people aren't chewing their food properly, it's going to stay in the digestive system, in the digestive tract for a lot longer, could potentially increase intestinal permeability, which then can lead to bacterial overgrowth, right?
So if you have, people call it leaky gut or intestinal permeability, whatever they want. Some people get really frothy if you say leaky gut. For me, it's the same thing. But
whatever, yeah.
If you're not getting these particles down, they end up in your bloodstream. And when they get in the bloodstream, the immune system sees that and it goes, okay, you're not supposed to be here. You're not food and you're not manufactured by the body. So I'm going to start attacking you. And then your immune system gets hypervigilant and you start getting food intolerances. And then over time, the hypothalamus will react by creating more cortisol to manage all this inflammation that's been induced by the immune system. And eventually it just suppresses the immune system to the point where now you can't fight the stuff. So you're constantly bloated and gassy, undigested food in the stool, and everything just gets worse. And then, like you said, you can get SIBO because some of the stuff isn't getting absorbed. And when it gets into the later stages of the small intestine, the bacteria are like, oh, great, we've got something to ferment. We got something to eat. And then the bacteria starts to get out of control and your immune system's suppressed, so it can't keep it under control. And then you start getting a little lower bowel pain. And then you go to a naturopath, hippie foo-foo person. They put you on a ketogenic diet and give you like $2,000 worth of worthless supplements that you don't need, which is it'll fix it, but you'll feel horrible, and it's not great for training or health. But so many things can happen. But it all starts here, and it starts here. So you ask strategies. The first thing I tell people is if you are sitting with your grandmother or your mom and you were eating a meal and they were cutting up your steak for you, how would they cut it up? And they cut it up in tiny little bites. So if you just cut your food into tinier bites, it's a lot easier to chew it more effectively because you don't have to chew it as much. Like if you go out with your bros and you go for a steak dinner, everyone will buy 400-gram rump and they'll see if they can swallow the damn thing in 3 bites. Like there's no trophies for deep throating a fucking steak.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings me to my next question. What are the benefits of fasting?
Okay. Wow, man, that's a big one to unpack too, isn't it? That's the one that everybody argues about.
Sorry, mate. I just wanted to touch on this because I've spoken about fasting before, and it's one of those tools that can be great for health to deal with a lot of those gut health things that we just spoke about. However, people don't look at it for the health benefits. They look at it for I'm just not going to eat, so I'm using it to lose weight. I'm putting myself in a caloric deficit, and I'm doing that through fasting. And the biggest issue I have is people say, do you have breakfast? No, I intermittent fast. What, every day? Yeah. Well, that's not intermittent fasting anymore. Intermittent means intermittent, not fucking every day.
Yeah. And and the thing is, that's another thing that irritates me about intermittent fasting because, when you look at the way a term was originally designed, and then over time it evolves into something else. Intermittent fasting is not a 16/8. Intermittent fasting is like every other day fasting. Okay, so that would be intermittent fasting. What they really need to say is I'm doing time restricted feeding. That's the more correct term for it. But I mean, now we call it intermittent fasting because everybody does. So I can just yell at the moon, or I can just
it's a buzzword, bro.
Yeah,
it's a buzzword. It's a fucking hashtag. Everyone understands it. They're like, oh, this is what intermittent fasting is. I'm just not going to eat for this period.
The thing, I like intermittent fasting and time restricted eating. I think it's brilliant. If I have somebody who's in a fat loss journey and they don't want to feel like they're dieting, as long as you can make it to your window, cool. I can put more food in, cut 2 or 3 meals, and you feel more satisfied. But you have to be able to get to the window. So if somebody's getting reactive hypoglycemia, we're probably not going to do that, or we're going to try to figure out why you're getting reactive hypoglycemia. If you're the person that if you don't eat breakfast and you're just hangry and you're a dickhead to people, we're probably not going to do that. or we might move your window to eating in the morning and cutting it out early at night to more properly match circadian rhythm anyways. But all of those methods work for people. It's just you have to find the one that that works the best in the time slot that they have and what they can actually do. But it's not, people think it's magical. There's nothing magical about it. And they talk about autophagy and they talk about all this shit. You get that just by training and being in a calorie deficit. I much prefer looking at it as like alternate day type of fasting and just saying, okay, a day is 24 hours. So what we're going to do is, let's say on a Tuesday from noon until Wednesday at noon, we're not going to eat anything. Okay, good. There's 1 day of fasting. That's all you really need. The body doesn't know, well, I ate on both of these 2 days. That's not really fasting. All your body knows is this has been 18 hours or longer is technically pretty much fasting. But I think that stuff's brilliant too, because you can use those days as a massive calorie deficit and then take that food and add it to other days. The problem is nobody does that. So we might say, okay, maybe you've got 2 conditioning days, light conditioning, aerobic stuff, where you're just doing aerobic training, maybe some walking, maybe you're doing some stretching. Okay, we're not going to eat in that 24-hour period, but I'm going to take that food and I'm going to put it on days, your hard training days, and you're working legs and back, when you're doing that stuff, or full body training, so that we can fuel the workout and then recover, and then we go through a 24-hour time span where then you're basically in your deficit.
And I think that ties into what we we're talking about before with the gut health stuff, because if people are eating all the time, it's like trying to pour oil into a funnel and just like overflowing that funnel, man. When we go through a period of fasting, we're actually giving the digestive system time to, start clearing everything out and absorbing those nutrients and pushing out, the waste from the body. And we're giving the system a little bit of a break, because, people don't understand that if we're constantly eating, like, that requires energy for your body to utilize, which is then taking energy away from other areas. Yeah,
I think it's like you got to squeeze you got to get all the toothpaste out of the tube. You got to squeeze it out, right? I think for a lot of those people, going to a vegan day where you're just eating vegetables, and maybe you're throwing a little bit of essential amino acids in there just to make sure you don't oxidize too much muscle tissue. That's a good thing, because people don't eat enough veggies anyway. So maybe having 2 vegan days where you're just smashing vegetables, and then just adding a little bit of essential amino acid, maybe some vitamins or whatever, getting a lot of fiber in to start pushing that out. And then for me, if I'm going to have somebody do fasting, I want them to not eat until they feel the migrating motor complex. So when you start feeling the stomach grumbling, you can feel movement, then I know your body's like, okay, I don't have food pushing this out. Now my intestines have to actually go through peristalsis and push it out themselves. And I think that's really useful. And I think it's really useful to get them to understand what hunger is. That hunger can be a few things. It can be boredom. It can be a lack of water, or you can be truly hungry. So if I want to teach somebody what true hunger is, maybe I don't have them eat for 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, maybe even 3 days, and let them feel what true hunger feels like, so they can start associating if they're bored versus if they're actually really hungry.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that I think, I'm not sure if I got this from you or someone else, but it definitely sounds like something you would say. I use this with my clients.
Course.
Yeah, probably. I use so much of that stuff, mate. It's brilliant. But, something I say to my clients is like, are you hungry or are you craving? And they're like, what do you mean? What's the difference? I'm like, well, if you're hungry and I put a bowl of broccoli in front of you, you're going to eat it. But if you're craving, you're not going to eat it.
That's good. Yeah. I like that. I'm going to start using that too. I'll give you credit for it though, because it's so true.
Fuck.
Like,
I thought that I got that from you, bro.
Nah, I don't think so. Maybe I say all kinds of crazy shit, so I don't know. But it's true. Look, like, if you're truly that hungry, I could put anything in front of you and you'd eat it. If you're like, I'm hungry, and you're like, I'm going to go to Macca's and get some nuggets with aioli, well, you're not really that hungry. But yeah, so that stuff can be. I think too, like if people listening to this want to experiment with this, I think it's a good idea to ease into it, because sometimes people, if they have any type of reactive hypoglycemia things, they can get an adverse reaction. It's going to make them not want to do it. So the first thing is like,
what does that mean for people listening?
So basically what it means, you can't keep your blood sugar stable. So you might have a glucose or insulin mismanagement problem. Your blood sugar drops, and then adrenaline gets increased because you can't regulate bringing your blood sugar back up. So you end up getting shaky. You can get disorientated. You can get blurry vision. You get like sweaty palms. Basically the same stuff you feel when you're at a bar and somebody's about to punch you in the face and you get the butterflies in your stomach. You start shaking. That's that adrenaline dump. So it might be more beneficial to ease into it by saying, okay, this week I'm going to skip breakfast. And then the next week I'm going to skip breakfast and lunch. And then the next week I'm going to go, okay, now one or 2 days a week, I'm just going to skip breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then see if I can last 24 hours. And then you can keep adding more. And what I'll try to do with some people is I'll work them from, kind of skipping breakfast to going to a 16-8. Maybe we go to a 20-4, and then I would go to 24, and then we see if we can get them on a 3-day one. And then we might throw a 3-day fast in there once or twice a year, just to kind of clean stuff out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you do any fasting? I go through periods where, I'll do like a 24-hour fast once a week.
Yeah, I mean, I almost exclusively time restrict eat. Now my window is a bit larger, so I usually won't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock, and then I'll finish that off at 9 or 10 at night. So that's what I usually do. Sometimes I'll go, dinner to dinner. But the problem with me is if I go dinner to dinner, I usually start binging. So that's not a great tactic for me right now. Now, if I get to a point where I don't have as much work and I'm not as stressed out, then I could probably go back to a 1, 2, or 3-day fast. But the more stressed you are, the harder it is to do that because you're mismanaging making energy anyways, and then you pull exogenous energy stores out, and your endogenous stores aren't supplying enough ATP for whatever reason, and then it pretty much makes people prone to having sugar and fat attacks. So you'll start eating stuff you don't normally eat. Like I don't eat a lot of,
and that's literally your body just saying, "Hey, I don't have much energy. I'm expending a lot of energy. I need something, short, sharp, quick, so I can push up my blood sugar levels and I have some available energy." So the first thing that people are going to go to is like these highly processed, palatable foods.
Anything with a lot of calories and like I said, hyperpalatable. So the body is evolutionarily, the body's in tune for that. If it finds high calorie foods, it wants to eat that because we're not that. People want to argue, oh, you can't talk about evolutionary stuff anymore, but we're still hunter-gatherers living in a not hunter-gatherer.
What do you mean you can't? Like we've been around for millions of years.
Well, people say that all the time. They're like, well, you can't equate nutrition and hunger to evolution, but you can. You can. Our genetics haven't evolved that much, not as fast as our environment is, right?
Dude, like a revolution is something that happens over a short period. Evolution happens over a fucking long period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I talk about this all the time with exercise and our program design stuff. There's nothing we're doing in the gym unless you're one of the movement guys and you're focusing on crawling and, side kick through stuff like that and rope climbing. That stuff's pretty natural to us as coming from primates. But when you talk about back squatting 200 kilos, our bodies orthopedically are not supposed to do that. Now we can get away with it, but it's like it's like a credit card that you got to pay back at some point. So you start getting all this compression and shear, putting the body through stuff it's not supposed to be doing. You're going to pay a price. So think about that from an evolutionary perspective. We're not really designed to do a lot of things we're doing in the gym. We do them because we want to and because it's badass. But same thing with nutrition. The further you get away from what we're designed to be able to process, the more consequences you're going to have to undo later.
We're going to come back to the training and the program design course in a moment, but I want to talk about I want to round out this portion with some of the fasting protocols because, there's definitely some health benefits to fasting. There's many different methods of doing it. It's not just don't eat for a certain period of time, but the point that I want to make here is that fasting can be good for some people, but it can also be terrible for some people. Like if people already have a poor relationship with food and they've, experienced anorexia or anything like that, where they've, seriously reduced their caloric intake for long periods of time, like getting those people to fast may not be a good option, right? Like they've already got a poor relationship with food and that might be adding into that. So this is where understanding your client and understanding their background, their history is so important, man, because if you just fucking go, oh, well, fasting's good, I'm just going to give this person fasting, but they've been dieting for, 18 months, they've slammed their metabolism, they've created metabolic adaptation, they're surviving on 800 calories a day, like getting those people to fast is probably not going to be a good thing. We probably want to get them, actually increasing their food throughout the day, smaller meals more frequently.
In a lot of cases, if we take the eating disorder stuff out, because that's a big one too, and a lot of coaches aren't supposed to be dealing with that anyways, even though we do, because our clients want to come to us and they expect that. They don't want to have a dietitian come in, which is what they're supposed to do, but yet they won't do it. So we have to figure out, what do I do? But I reckon a lot of people need to just eat more globally with more structure before they start a diet. Because you always get people that come in and go, I swear I'm only eating 1,200 calories. Yet Monday through Friday you are, and on the weekend the wheels come off, and you're eating like 4 or 5 days of food over the weekend, and food and booze. Let's just eat that much all the time and just be consistent every day. Then now we can start a deficit. So a lot of cases, people don't want to hear this, but you probably would need to eat more every day first. Eliminate the binges, try to reduce the booze as much as possible, make better choices over the weekend. Now we have a good concept of, on average, what are you having every day? Cool. Now I've got a baseline. How's your weight going? How do you feel? Okay, now let's take 5 or 10% of your calories out and start a slow reduction of calories. But a lot of the gym pop, they're delusional about what they're actually doing. I'm just eating 1,500 calories. No, you're not. You're probably eating 2,800 a day because your weekend is blowing your average out of the water.
What's happening there, like the way that I explain this to people is like you're essentially putting yourself in starvation mode, in quotation marks, throughout the week. And then, when you do binge on the weekend, you overeat, your body's like, fuck yeah, we've got all this extra energy coming in. Let's start storing this shit.
Yeah, I think it takes a good 4 or 5 days of very low calorie dieting for you to start affecting or maladapting the metabolism. So what I think is happening is you get people, they think they're eating a certain amount, but they're not tracking, so they have no idea. They're skipping meals, they're stressed out during the week, they're underslept, they're over-exercising in relation to how much food they are. So they're in a larger net deficit than they think Monday through Friday, and then the weekend comes and their body's like, shit, yeah, food, and then they can't stop eating, and then they end up eating 5,000-6,000 calories a day without even thinking about it. And so they're not overeating long enough to counteract the Monday through Friday. So they do this week after week after week after week. And then the booze is going to mess a lot of things up with your metabolism, and that can, and blood pressure and heart rate and stress response. And that'll carry through 3 or 4 days after you're done drinking, or binge drinking, I should say, because most people don't drink, they binge drink over the weekend. And then by the end of the week, you've created all this metabolic mishap, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And over years of doing this, they get in a really bad spot. I think one of the things people don't understand how many calories are in booze. They're like, well, this is low carb beer, or this is, vodka doesn't have any carbs or fat, but it's got a lot of calories, and that adds up when you go drink after drink and you're pounding that stuff. And at that point too, it's not just about calories. It's also about the effect on your immune system and inflammation and your stress response. Yeah,
you're essentially putting poison in your body, and your body treats it like a toxin.
That's right. It is fun. I mean, I love a good drink, but if you're serious about building muscle and losing fat, you've got to pull a lot of that out. And if people would just go without for more than a day, what they'd realize is they don't need that many drinks to feel loose. I've also got a protocol for that too. Like if you're the type of person that you're drinking because you're self-medicating because of stress, the best thing to do is slam quite a bit just initially, just hammer a few drinks, and then you'll get loose really fast because you're basically outsmarting alcohol dehydrogenase. So you put more booze in your body than you can actually detox really fast, and then you stop, and then you just maintain it on 1 or 2 drinks.
It's like that funnel I was talking about before. Your body takes a little bit of time to process it. Yeah, so you're just outrunning your ability to detox it by sculling a bunch of drinks real quick, and then you end up saying something stupid to one of your friends, and now you're no longer friends. So there's pros and cons of every protocol. Let's throw in some fasting before that as well. No, don't do that.
Oh, yeah. Don't eat anything and just booze it up.
24-hour fast, then get on the piss.
Well, the nice thing about booze is thermic effect is around 17%. So at least 70% of the calories is poof gone. So basically just eat protein, veg, and booze, and you're pretty good.
All right, mate. Let's move on to the program design course. Talk to my audience about what that course is about and why it's important to understand that, not just from a coach's perspective, but also from a general population client's perspective as well. Why it's so important to understand like what muscles do and how to train them.
Yeah, man. And I'll be honest, this is the course I didn't want to write. At least I didn't want to write it yet. I wanted to keep on with foundations and gut health and immune system, all that stuff. But I was hired to come out to a 3-day workshop and teach in a fairly large year-long program for another company. And the whole program was, they brought in special guests to teach stuff. And they were supposed to learn how to actually coach and write a program properly and how to periodize. And it ended up being just a sales and marketing type of thing with very little teaching of how to coach and how to program. I'm like, okay, you're putting the cart before the horse. You can't just market and sell without a good product. If you do, then you're just going to spend all your time. You're just going to be a market and salesperson and not an actual coach. So after I did my seminar, a bunch of the students came up and said, look, I'm a bit lost here because this program is supposed to teach me how to actually train people and how to write programs. And I've not learned any of that except for your lecture. And I went, cool. And they said, will you write a program, a big, giant, comprehensive program for program design? And I went, I don't want to, but I guess I'm going to have to. Yeah. And no one was writing how to train Gen Pop. It's all how to train athletes. I went, okay, so now I'm going to have to write this. So it started as an eight-week course, and now it's moved to like a 12 modules. And we were going to do it initially you go through 3 times and you're done. And then I kept adding stuff to it. So then it's like, okay, you sign up and you're in it for as long as you feel you need to be in it to get the job done. So it's a terrible business plan, but for me, it's the right thing to do because with what we teach, you can't learn this in a 10-week course. You're going to need to do this 4, 5, 6 times before you actually put all the pieces together because there's so much overwhelming amount of information. Because we go through, again, stress stuff and how that affects your exercise metabolism. We go through exercise metabolism, so that kind of the chemistry behind that. We go through the standard sets, reps, time under tension, rest, order of exercises, training methods, periodization. We go through all that stuff that everybody else goes through. But we layer on a lot of other stuff like how stress affects that, lifestyle affects that, how we don't talk a lot about nutrition, but a little basic nutrition in there. So because we've got the other nutrition course, we go through stretching, mobility stuff. We go through how to get people out of pain, how to run structural balance, how to periodize stuff from horrible metrics, horrible pain, horrible structural stuff. Okay, how do we fix that really fast? And then how do we move from that GPP phase and move into more of an SPP, specific conditioning or specific preparedness phase? So yeah, it's a lot. We've added in group training module, online training module. We've added in a very small sales and marketing module. We've got a forum. We've got bi-monthly calls that we do. They're all recorded, time-stamped, and then uploaded. So we've got hundreds of hours of calls on there where I'll do surprise lectures or Q&A and that type of stuff. So it's become massive. We've got 400 and something coaches in it now, which nice. is awesome. And a lot of them are really active on the forum. But yeah, and we're about to revamp a lot of it. So we've got a big assessment. If you don't have some type of assessment, you can't give people an exercise. If you have to look at how's their internal and external rotation of their femur, how is their anterior and posterior tilt of their pelvis, how is their lumbar flexion extension, thoracic lumbar flexion extension, how's their cervical neck, how's their head rotate. You got to take all this stuff into account before you give prescriptive exercise, because everybody is fucked up in their own special way. You have to know how to assess that before you give them a back squat or a deadlift or an overhead press. So we go through a lot of that stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's pause there on the assessments for a moment, because assessments, as you said, they're so fucking important, man. Like, it gives you an understanding of where people have muscular imbalances and dysfunction, man. Like, And a lot of the times when people, let's be honest, most Gen Pop clients, even athletes, have some form of chronic pain, whether that's in the knee, the elbow, hip, back, whatever. And if we can understand that, muscles pull on bones to articulate joints or stabilize joints, like then we can understand that, hey, maybe one of these muscles is causing an effect up or down the chain, whether that muscle's weak or maybe that muscle's overactive, like that has a flow on effect right throughout the kinetic chain. So let's talk about that for a moment and how you use those assessments to then come up with your exercise that you're going to prescribe for people.
Yeah. So kind of layering on what you just said, like you may have an issue in one joint, but that's also going to affect everything else. So, if you think about the two things that are most important to people, oxygen and walking. Right? If you can't get oxygen in, that your body's going to try to prioritize that. If you have some type of imbalance and a bone is out of a joint, your body's going to compensate to keep you standing and walking to be able to hunt for food and hunt for water. So that's not just going to affect, if this shoulder is jacked up, that other hip's going to get jacked up. And eventually that hip is going to affect this hip. And then that hip's going to affect that shoulder. And that hip's going to affect your knee. It's going to affect your foot. So you got to look at, where is all this stuff starting from and where's it ending from? And we've got to reverse engineer this to try to fix people fast. Like for me, it's always about hips and lumbar spine. If I can get the hips and lumbar spine better, everything works up and down. But we use passive range of motion testing. We use active range of motion testing. So if you can't get a joint in its full active range, we need to fix that. If you have pain in passive range, we probably need to refer out, or if you're a therapist, we can work on that. So that's the first most important thing too, is if I'm doing a passive range of motion test for your shoulder and your shoulder hurts when we get here and it hurts when we get here and your muscles aren't doing that, I'm moving you. Okay, that's a problem because you're probably going to need to do more than what a coach can do. We're going to probably send somebody in to get to a physio or an osteopath to figure out what's going on. Maybe they need an MRI. But we need to get them out of passive pain and before we can fix them actively. If they're in pain actively, then a lot of that stuff we can probably fix just by working on the T-spine and working on the scapula, then working on the glenohumeral joint at the end. But for instance, let's say if I'm testing shoulder extension, right? And I'm looking at, I need about 60 degrees of active shoulder extension if I want to do things like dips. Okay? If you come down to a dip and you don't have 60 degrees, now I've got to compensate. So the upper traps will pull stuff up. I'll start to hunch over, trying to get false range. You don't own that range. You don't have enough canvas to work there. So we need to figure out how to improve this with exercise to get you there. So then that unlocks new exercises for you. So I look a lot of it as like a video game. Yeah, I was a big World of Warcraft guy. So like you start out with this dude who a little gnome mage. He can't do shit, right? He's a weak as shit. He doesn't have any spells. And then you try to level him up. So for me, it's like, okay, at what level are you? Okay, now I need to get you that next level, which means if you're here or you're here, I need to fix that to unlock new exercises for you to do. If I can't get in the shoulder flexion, common thing is shoulder flexion. That's where I see the most of it, shoulder flexion and abduction, where they've got a little bit of excessive kyphosis, so all this has kind of come down. Their shoulder blade has responded by protracting and typically elevating, and then anterior rotation. So if you're here, you can't get in the shoulder flexion. If you push your shoulder here and try to go in the shoulder flexion, you can't, which means I can't do overhead press, because if I do, I have to then lean back and jam up my TL junction. I can't, there's a lot of shit I can't do. I need to figure out what is here that's pulling this. Pec minor, how do I get that? How do I release this? I've got to do specific pec stretches. So I've got to work on a neural stretch like PNF and hard isometric stretching. I have to work on specific lifting protocols to then get that muscle to mechanically lengthen so that the scapula tilts back and gets in the right position. And then I have to work on the stuff on the back, right? So like if I see anterior and depressed scapula, I'm going to be working on stretching that pec minor using specific protocols, and then I'm going to work on shoulder abduction, external rotation, and usually some downward rotation with the rhomboids and some upward rotation with the lower traps and mid traps. And then once this gets pulled back, I don't have a problem doing flexion or pressing overhead. I'm not going to have a problem with side laterals. I'm not going to be jamming up my my acromion and my AC joint.
Yeah.
But that if I don't do if I don't do a body reading, if I don't know how to look at somebody, if I don't know how to draw plumb lines on people and see if they're forward, if they're backward, if their shoulders forward, neck forward, I'm going to give them exercise that will be really good if they have really good posture, but it's going to be really bad when they're trying to overhead press like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, mate. Like, I obviously work with a lot of fighters at Tiger Muay Thai, and, you know, those guys, they have this rounded forward posture, and their jab hand, like their shoulder blade is elevated, protracted, like, and I'm not going to give them overhead pressing movements. Right. If I am going to press in a vertical manner, it's probably going to be like a landmine press. It's not going to be totally overhead. It's going to be probably a little bit more in front. But, you know, I want to look at their mechanics. I want to look at their posture. And then, you know, what most people don't consider is that the shoulder joint is actually 4 joints, like SC, AC, scapulothoracic, and then the glenohumeral joint. And people think that, like, you know, I've got pain in the shoulder, the glenohumeral joint, like that's where it must be coming from. No, that's like the symptom. That's not the cause. The cause is you probably don't have good connection to the musculature of the back that are actually controlling the scapula and putting the scapula in the correct position with the is it scapulohumeral rhythm? Where the humerus goes, the scapula should move alongside it.
Yeah, it should. So you should, and look, the clavicle should move as well. People don't think about the sternum and the clavicle. So if you're in this position and the clavicle's depressed and that pec minor is pulling everything down, it's going to be really difficult to then get the shoulder in the right position. So you kind of have to force it there. When you force it there, the humerus isn't rotating properly anyway. So now you're just slamming the head of the humerus into the acromion, slamming into supraspinatus. Your posterior delt, infraspinatus, teres minor aren't going to be working. And so people go, well, I'll just do a lot of external rotation. Well, if you're doing external rotation here, it's not working. It has to be here. And you don't want to have to hold it back there. You'll see people go, and they'll just set it back there. That's not going to work. That stuff needs to move, especially for fighters, jiu-jitsu guys, wrestlers, punchers. This stuff has to be able to move together. That they're not going to get ready to punch somebody and go, and set that scapula, because they're going to be in that kyphotic rotated position anyways, because they're trying to protect their guts, and they're going to be blocking and all that. I'm a horrible puncher. That's why I do jiu-jitsu. I don't like getting punched in the face. I'm a taekwondo kicker and a grappler. So, but if you think about when they get on the ground, you're always in a kyphotic head forward position, shoulders internally rotated, because if you're on your back, you don't want your shoulders on the ground. If you're in the front, you're trying to keep them on the ground. So one thing I think a lot about is when you look at, say, fighters, it's not necessarily that you want to fix their posture, but if they're in pain, you need to give them good tolerance to have their joints in a lot of positions and to own both extension and flexion. You've got to own those, because if you try to fix that too much, you can throw off their whole game, because they're going to have a hard time. You spend all this time trying to extend the T-spine. Then when they try to flex, they're like, shit, now we created a different issue. And that last thing I'll say too is people need to understand that the absence of pain is not the absence of dysfunction, because there's also a big movement right now that says, oh, you don't need to do any corrective work. You just train with lighter weights. Okay. I hate to tell you this, but you can have pain in a joint and not be cognizant, because it's not to the point where your brain thinks it needs to tell you. So when the mechanoreceptor senses there's some type of issue, it talks to the brain. It's like, hey, should we tell Luke that there's a problem? Brain goes, no, just tighten this and lengthen this and move it here. Okay. Eventually it runs out of room to do anything, and the brain goes, okay, we need to tell Luke now. And you're like, oh shit, what is that? That wasn't there yesterday. It was.
Yeah, now my joint's like jamming up against itself and it's locked up. I've decreased my range of movement and I've created some muscular imbalances and dysfunction. Now I'm loading that joint through a misaligned position.
Yeah, and the tissue is constantly changing to try to move yourself towards more space, more stability. But sometimes to get there, you're creating other dysfunctions. So then when you try to move a certain way, now you don't own that range anymore. You can't get there.
Yeah, that's a great point, mate. Like I've had some of my fighters doing Jefferson curls, and people like looking at me weird, like, what the fuck? What are you doing? Like, why are you putting me in that position? I'm like, well, they're going to get in that position, so I need to train them in that position. I'm not, as you said, I'm not trying to fix their posture. I'm trying to, make them better connected to the musculature that is going to control their, scapular function, which is then going to aid in better shoulder health and function overall. But at the end of the day, like, we need to train these guys in these positions that they're going to find themselves in, because we get injured in areas, joint angles that we're weak. We don't have control.
Yeah, and look, if you think about grapplers and MMA guys, you're going to be put in, if you get stacked, you're going to be put in lumbar flexion, whether you like it or not, with somebody on top of you. So you better have good stability, control, strength, and flexion tolerance, or you're done. Like, I see it all the time. People get stacked on the mat, and then they're like, oh, and they walk off the mat. You don't see them for a couple of months because their back's fucked.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely, mate. All right, great point to start wrapping up, mate. One thing I do want to talk about is you guys have an affiliation with Exercise Therapy Association. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. So that's all about, those protocols that we've just spoken about looking at doing an assessment, looking at joint alignment, looking at musculature that is going to pull the joint into correct position, and then load it through good alignment. Talk to me about your affiliation with those guys and why you partnered up with them.
Brendan's a good guy. He saw me at Swiss and asked us if we want to do an affiliation thing. We said, yeah, sure. So now that the world's closed off, what we might do is possibly teach some of their stuff over here, because they can't come over here. But right now, we don't really know what's going on. So right now, it's just like we've got affiliation back and forth through our products and stuff. And they do things quite a bit different than us, because Brennan comes from more of that physiotherapy background. So they use a lot of the traditional stuff and then link it in with exercise. Where we come from a more sports performance background, where we probably use a lot more loaded and heavier stuff and linking it into a workout. So it's basically same foundational stuff between us. Just the way we do it, the way I program it, and the way they program stuff is quite a bit different. But all in all, it's basically the same type of stuff. Quite a bit different teaching style too. So I don't know if they're a bit shocked at the stuff that falls out of my mouth when I teach. And I'm like, look, I'll be a good boy when I teach for you, but I'm not going to be a good boy when I teach for me, because that's what my students expect, because I'm a fucking maniac.
That's my personality. That's my style.
Yeah, I'm not going to water that down to make somebody more comfortable. I will for your course, but for other people's courses, but not for mine.
Yeah, great, mate. And just to tie in with what you said, those methods are complementing each other. It's not like, one or the other. It's like, well, it's tools in a toolbox, right? Like, the more tools I have in a toolbox,
100%.
the more options I have to be able to apply to people, like, if the only thing, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So we need to make sure that as coaches in particular, we need to have these tools in the toolbox, so that if one of our clients comes to us with experiencing certain symptoms or whatever, we can look at everything and go, all right, what's the right protocol for this person right now that's going to get them out of pain, get them moving better, so that then they can, go through a training session that is going to provide the stimulus that required for adaptation.
100%. And you've got to look at, there's stuff that we do that is correct for a certain type of client, and there's stuff that they do that's better for a certain type of client, right? Like, when we look at our stuff, how do we get people performing faster? Whereas there's a lot of, how do I just get people out of pain? So it's a lot of with their stuff is probably a lot easier to implement with normal people than ours. And ours tends to be a bit more complex. It's a bit larger, bigger stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sweet, mate. If people want to get in contact with you, or they're interested in the Foundations Nutrition course, Program Design course, I think you've got an online course available as well. Where can they find that stuff?
And we've got a new hypertension course coming up, hypertension heart disease course. So I just have to find time to record it, and I need a haircut. Can't do a course with hair like that. But so we've got. Obviously, you can find us on Facebook. Nobody uses Facebook anymore for that stuff. But so at Muscle Nerds on Facebook, Instagram, Muscle Nerds _health. If they like memes, they can go to my meme page at Luke Leaman. Because that's all that is just really bad, unpolitically correct memes. But
highly recommended. Always on Instagram stories. Good memes.
That's just my toilet time. If you see me post like 6 or 7 memes, then I'm taking a crap.
Liv's taking the shit.
He's taking it. And then info@musclenerds.net is where people can inquire for stuff, for online training or for education, that type of stuff.
Awesome, mate. Always appreciate having a chat to you, bro. I love hearing your insights. I love having conversations around the fitness industry and what's going on and just shooting the shit with you.
Hey, we're gonna have to talk a bit more about what's going on with you right now in Russia. Mother Russia.
We shall do. Let's do that offline. Cheers, mate. This episode was brought to you by Swiss 8, which is a proactive mental health program designed by veterans, initially for veterans, that has been pushed out to the wider community, that allows you to structure in and schedule their 8 pillars of health and wellness, including nutrition, sleep, time management, discipline, fitness, personal growth, mindfulness, and minimalism. This episode was also brought to you by Be Spunky, which is a male hormone optimization supplement that I've been taking for about a year and a half, and I absolutely rate. It is a TGA listed nutraceutical, meaning that it's made from all organic produce to help you manage and optimize your stress levels, which in turn increases your ability to improve testosterone production levels naturally. Use the code COBES10 at checkout for your 10% discount. All of those links will be in the show notes. If you got some benefit from this episode, please make sure you pass it off to your friends and family. I'd appreciate any shares on social media platforms. If you tag me or if you share it to your stories, make sure you tag me so I can share that as well. Any 5-star ratings and reviews are much appreciated. Much love, guys. Peace.